The massive doors of the Galaxy Council chamber slid open with a deep hum. Inside, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that could hold 300 beings. Today, the chamber felt smaller. Tension filled the air like smoke. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim walked through the entrance. His black hair was neat, his simple gray suit clean but unremarkable. Next to the towering Zenthari delegates with their crystal armor, or the flowing energy forms of the Kalari, he looked ordinary. Almost boring. That was exactly what made him dangerous. The Zenthari representative, Vexthul, watched the human approach with 6 red eyes. His crystal-like body sparkled under the chamber's lights. "So this is the creature that thinks it can change our galaxy," Vexthul said to his aide. His voice sounded like breaking glass. Hyunwoo took his seat at the small section marked for humanity. Earth had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Most species here had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Yet somehow this young race had caused enough trouble to call an emergency session. Council leader Thalmoran floated above the center of the table. The ancient being's energy field pulsed with authority. "We gather today to address the human problem," Thalmoran announced. "In 5 decades, they have expanded across 3 star systems. They have made trade deals with species that refuse to trade with us. They have solved conflicts we could not solve in centuries." Murmurs spread around the table. The Morgani Empire's delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree, rustled his leaves with displeasure. "The humans ignore proper channels," he said. "They make agreements without asking permission from established powers. They ended the Morgani Draconis border war in 1 week," added the Draconis representative, her scaled face showing confusion. "We had been fighting over those systems for 300 years. One human mediator arrived and suddenly we were signing peace treaties." Hyunwoo listened without speaking. He had learned long ago that aliens like to talk first. They would tell him everything he needed to know if he just waited. The Kalari delegate spoke next. Their voice came from everywhere and nowhere like wind through leaves. "The humans approached us with respect. They learned our customs. They offered trade that helped both our peoples. The admission seemed to embarrass them. The Kalari had not traded with outsiders for 2,000 years. Vexthul slammed a crystal hand on the table. "This is exactly the problem. They bypass our authority. They ignore the natural order of things. Strong species rule. Weak species obey. That is how the galaxy has always worked. Except it has not been working," Hyunwoo said quietly. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. He activated a small device on his wrist, and holographic displays appeared around the chamber. "You say we ignore the natural order. Let me show you what your natural order has created." The first display showed a map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of active conflict. Yellow zones showed trade disputes. Orange zones indicated refugee movements. Nearly half the galaxy was colored. 47 active wars, Hyunwoo said. 233 trade disputes. 16 million refugees with nowhere to go. 6 species on the edge of extinction because they cannot get food shipments through combat zones. He gestured and the display changed. This is what happened after the Busan Accords. The red zones began turning green. We did not force anyone to sign. We simply asked each side what they actually wanted, not what they said they wanted. The Morgani delegate shifted uncomfortably. The Busan Accords were effective, but you had no right to interfere. We interfered because people were dying, Hyunwoo replied. The Zirion mining conflict killed 12 million beings over rock that both sides could share. We showed them how to share it. Everyone got what they needed. Another display appeared. The Seoul Protocol created the first interspecies cultural exchange program. Students from your worlds now study together. They learn each other's languages. They become friends instead of enemies. The Draconis delegate leaned forward. My daughter participated in that program. She spent a year on Kalari Prime. She says it changed how she sees the universe. Cultural exchange weakens species identity, Vexthul objected. It makes beings forget who they are. Or it helps them remember that they are all alive in the same galaxy, Hyunwoo suggested. The Incheon Treaty created our disaster relief organization. When the Gamma Sector asteroid storm hit, 17 species worked together to save lives. They had been enemies for centuries, but when people needed help, none of that mattered. The energy field around Thalmoran pulsed brighter. You speak of cooperation. But cooperation requires trust. How do we trust a species that grows so quickly, that changes everything they touch? Hyunwoo smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. You already do trust us. 3 of you have asked human mediators to help with internal problems. 5 of you use human-designed trade frameworks. Half of the stable trade routes in this galaxy depend on agreements we helped create. The admission hit the chamber like a bomb. Several delegates looked away. Others whispered to their aides. The question is not whether humans are changing the galaxy, Hyunwoo continued. The question is whether that change is good or bad. You called this meeting because you are afraid. But afraid of what? That conflicts might end? That your people might stop dying in pointless wars? That beings might learn to work together instead of fighting? Bexthel's crystal body darkened with anger. We are afraid that humans will dominate us through trickery instead of honest strength. We do not want to dominate anyone, Hyunwoo said. We want to live in a galaxy where our children can visit other worlds without fear. Where trade helps everyone instead of just the strong. Where problems get solved instead of passed down to the next generation. He deactivated the displays and looked around the chamber. Every agreement we have made can be ended. Every framework we have created can be replaced. We do not force anyone to work with us. We simply offer better options than war and isolation. The chamber stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, Thalmorn spoke. The Council will consider what you have said. But understand this, human. The galaxy has an order. Change that comes too fast can be dangerous. Change that comes too slowly can be deadly, Hyunwoo replied. Ask the beings who died while you debated instead of acting. As the session ended, delegates filed out in small groups, whispering among themselves. Several looked back at Hyunwoo with expressions he could not read. Some seemed curious. Others appeared worried. Bexthel paused at the door. This is not over, human. The Council will not allow your species to upset the balance of power. Hyunwoo gathered his things calmly. The balance of power was already upset. We are just trying to fix it. After everyone left, Hyunwoo stood alone in the empty chamber. He knew this was just the beginning. The old powers would not give up their control easily. But change was coming whether they wanted it or not. The only question was whether it would come through cooperation or conflict. 3 months had passed since the emergency council session. In a secure briefing room deep within the council headquarters, Intelligence Officer Morgeth spread holographic files across a metal table. The Zenthari's crystal body reflected the blue light of the displays as he reviewed his findings. The human network is larger than we thought, Morgeth said to the assembled intelligence team. Much larger. On the mining world of Kepler 402b, Jiun Park sat in a prefab building that served as a meeting hall. Around her, representatives from 3 different species argued loudly. The Corvin delegate, a bear-like creature with gray fur, pounded the table with massive fists. The deep mines are ours by right of first claim. The Alterian representative, thin and pale with large black eyes, shook her head rapidly. First claim means nothing. We have the better equipment. We can extract twice the ore. The third delegate belonged to the Thakari, a reptilian species with green scales. He hissed softly before speaking. Both your peoples waste resources. The Thakari method preserves the planet while maximizing profit. Jian listened to each argument carefully. She had spent 6 months on this world, learning about each species. The Corvins valued strength and direct action. The Alterians prized efficiency and technology. The Thakari focused on long-term sustainability. What if you were all right? Jiun asked quietly. The 3 delegates stopped arguing and stared at her. The Corvins found the deposits first. That should mean something. The Alterians have better extraction technology. That is valuable. The Thakari methods will make sure the planet stays healthy for future mining. All of these things matter. She activated a small projector. A 3-dimensional model of the mining operations appeared above the table. What if we divided the work instead of the territory? Corvin surveys find new deposits. Alterian equipment extracts the ore safely. Thakari environmental teams make sure we do no permanent damage. The Corvin delegate scratched his snout. What about profits? Split 3 ways, but based on contribution, Jiun explained. Corvins get paid for each new deposit they find. Alterians get paid based on extraction efficiency. Thakari get paid for keeping environmental damage below agreed limits. Everyone profits when the operation succeeds. 3 months later, the Kepler 442b cooperative had become the most profitable mining operation in the sector. More importantly, 3 species that had been ready to fight over the planet were now planning joint operations on 4 other worlds. Back in the council briefing room, Morgeth displayed another file. Frontier Station Omega-7, he announced. 6 months ago, it was a failed trading post on the edge of civilized space. Today, it processes more trade than stations that have operated for centuries. Dong-Hyun Lee stood on the observation deck of Omega-7, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the station's ports. The station had been almost empty when he arrived. Now, beings who had been enemies for generations conducted business side by side. The secret was the win-win protocol, a simple set of rules Dong-Hyun had developed. Every trade had to benefit both parties. Disputes were settled by neutral arbitration. Information about prices and availability was shared openly. No species could dominate the market through force or deception. It should not work, admitted Kevtar, the Zenthari trade captain. My people have always believed that trade is war by other means. The strong take from the weak. Dong-Hyun watched a Kalari energy ship dock next to a Morgani cargo hauler. 6 months ago, those 2 species would have shot at each other on sight. What if trade is not war? He suggested. What if it is cooperation with profit? The Zenthari captain's crystal body flickered with confusion. How can both sides win? Easy, you have something I need. I have something you need, we trade. Now we both have what we need. Dong-Hyun pointed to the docking bay. The Kalari ship carries energy crystals. The Morgani ship has rare metals. The Kalari need metals for their technology. The Morgani need energy for their cities. They trade and both go home with what they wanted. But someone must lose, Kevtar insisted. That is the way of the universe. The only ones who lose are the pirates and smugglers who used to control trade in this sector, Dong-Hyun replied. When honest traders can do business safely, everyone benefits. Morgeth's presentation continued with more disturbing news. The humans have been conducting secret negotiations between council members themselves, he announced. The room fell silent. Interfering in council politics was forbidden for non-members. On the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Bridge, So Young Choi reviewed the latest agreements. The Zenthari-Kalari trade embargo had been killing both economies for 2 years. Officially, neither side would back down. Privately, both wanted a way out that would not look like surrender. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of ending the embargo, they would create humanitarian exceptions for medical supplies and food. These exceptions would gradually expand until normal trade resumed. Both sides could claim they had not given in to pressure. The Morgani territorial dispute was more challenging, So Young told her aide. Taemin Park. Both sides claimed the same star system based on ancient treaties. How did you resolve it? Taemin asked. I suggested they were both reading the treaties wrong. The ancient precursor civilization that wrote those treaties was talking about shared stewardship, not ownership. The system has enough resources for both species if they work together. The Morgani and Draconis delegations had been suspicious at first. But So Young had studied their languages and cultures for months. She knew that both species valued historical accuracy above personal pride. When she showed them the linguistic evidence, they accepted it. In the council briefing room, the intelligence team reviewed dozens more cases. Human diplomats were everywhere, solving problems that had seemed impossible. They worked quietly, asking for no credit or recognition. This is what worries me most, Morgeth said, displaying his final chart. The humans are not just making agreements. They are teaching other species how to make agreements. Their methods are spreading. The chart showed a network of connections spreading across the galaxy. Species that had never trusted each other were forming partnerships. Old enemies were becoming trading partners. Young beings from different worlds were studying together and forming friendships. We tried to contain human influence by limiting their expansion, Morgeth continued. But influence does not require territory. It requires relationships. And the humans are very good at building relationships. Council member Karnash studied the data with growing alarm. The 4-armed Draconis had served on the council for 3 centuries. She had seen many species rise and fall, but never had she seen anything like this. They are not conquering through force, she said slowly. They are conquering through usefulness. Every species that works with them becomes dependent on their methods. What do we do? Asked another council member. Karnash stared at the network display. Red lines connected human diplomats to trade agreements, peace treaties, and cooperative ventures across known space. The web of influence was vast and growing. "We have three choices," she said finally. "We can try to destroy the network by removing the humans. We can try to replace them with our own people. Or we can try to control them by making them dependent on us. Which option do you recommend?" Morgoth asked. Karnash was quiet for a long time. The display showed the galaxy before and after human involvement. Before, a patchwork of conflicts, trade wars, and isolated civilizations. After, a growing web of cooperation and mutual benefit. "I recommend we be very careful," she said at last, "because if we remove the humans now, we may discover that we cannot survive without them." The meeting ended with no decisions made, but everyone in the room understood the terrifying truth. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through strength or cunning. They had made themselves necessary. And necessary things were very hard to remove. Outside the meeting room, Morgoth transmitted a coded message to his superiors. The human problem was worse than anyone had imagined. They were not just changing individual conflicts or trade agreements. They were changing the fundamental way species interacted with each other. The question was no longer how to stop them. The question was whether it was already too late. The Galaxy Council's emergency session convened at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. Council leader Thalmoran's energy field pulsed with determination as he addressed the assembly. "The human influence has grown too far. Today, we act." The decision was unanimous among the major powers. Economic sanctions would cripple human trade routes. Diplomatic immunity would be revoked, forcing human negotiators off neutral territories. Military escorts would be withdrawn from human settlements in disputed regions. "The humans will learn their place," declared Vexthal, his crystal body gleaming with satisfaction. "When their pretty words cannot feed their colonies or protect their ships, they will beg us for mercy." The sanctions took effect immediately. Human trade vessels found their docking permits canceled at major stations. Diplomatic pouches were seized at checkpoints. Bank accounts were frozen across 12 star systems. Within 6 hours, the first cracks appeared. On the Zenthari homeworld, crystal spires that had gleamed for millennia began to dim. The power grid depended on energy cells manufactured by the Kalari, but the Zenthari-Kalari trade route had been mediated by human negotiators for 2 years. Without human oversight, old suspicions returned quickly. Kalari Captain Morveth stared at the Zenthari trade coordinator through the view screen. "Your people's payment methods are unacceptable," Morveth said, her voice carrying across dimensional frequencies. "We require the old guarantees." "The old guarantees included tribute payments that bankrupted our outer colonies," the Zenthari coordinator replied. "The human mediators helped us design a fair system. The human mediators are gone. We return to traditional arrangements or there is no deal." The Zenthari coordinator's crystal body darkened with anger. "Then there is no deal." The energy shipment that could have powered half the Zenthari homeworld turned away from the docking bay. Similar scenes played out across dozens of trade routes. Agreements that had seemed solid crumbled as species remembered why they had distrusted each other in the first place. On the border between Morgani and Draconis space, military commanders received new orders. The human-mediated peace treaty was void. Old territorial claims were active again. General Thakmori of the Morgani Empire studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. "Deploy the fleet to reclaim the disputed systems," he ordered. "Without human interference, we can settle this properly." Across the border, Draconis Admiral Vekshan gave similar commands. "The tree people think they can take our worlds while we are distracted. Show them the price of aggression." The first shots were fired 18 hours after the sanctions began. Small patrol ships engaged in brief skirmishes near asteroid mining stations. No one died, but the message was clear. The peace was ending. By the end of the first day, 7 different conflicts had reignited. Trade routes worth trillions of credits lay abandoned. Refugee ships fled from border regions as civilians remembered what war looked like. In the council chambers, emergency reports poured in from across the galaxy. The Kalari had imposed energy embargoes on 3 species. The Zenthari were mobilizing their crystal fleets. The Morgani Empire was recalling ambassadors from former enemies. "This is temporary chaos," Vexthal assured the council. "Once the humans are properly contained, order will return." But the chaos was spreading faster than anyone expected. On the neutral station Omega-7, the win-win protocol collapsed within hours. Without human oversight, competing species began using the old methods of trade negotiation: threats, bribes, and blockades. Captain Kevtar of the Zenthari found himself facing a Kalari energy ship across the station's main docking bay. Both crews had weapons powered but not aimed. "Not yet. Your people owe us compensation for the cancelled energy contracts," the Kalari captain transmitted. "We owe you nothing," Kevtar replied. "Our contracts were with human mediators. Those contracts are void. Then we will collect compensation by seizing your cargo. Try it, and see what happens." Station Commander Rex Moley, an insectoid Thakari, watched the standoff with growing panic. His station had become the most successful trading post in the sector by following human protocols. Now those protocols meant nothing, and he had no idea how to prevent a shooting war in his docking bays. The situation grew worse when a Morgani cargo hauler arrived, carrying rare metals that both the Zenthari and Kalari needed. Without human mediation, there was no fair way to divide the shipment. The old method would be auctioned by combat, with the strongest species taking the most valuable cargo. "Evacuate all civilian personnel," Commander Rex Moley ordered his staff. "Seal the blast doors. This is about to become a battlefield." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The carefully constructed web of agreements, trade routes, and peaceful cooperation began unraveling like a cheap rope under stress. But the worst problems were inside the council itself. For 2 years, human diplomat So Young Choi had been quietly mediating disputes between council members. Most delegates did not even realize they were receiving human assistance. They thought the compromises and solutions came from their own wisdom. Without human input, the council's next session devolved into chaos within minutes. The Zenthari demand immediate military support for their energy crisis, Vexthul announced. "This is the Kalari's responsibility." The Kalari delegate's voice crackled with dimensional static. "We have no obligation to supply energy to species that refuse fair payment." "Define fair payment," challenged the Morgani representative. "Your people have been overcharging for energy since the peace accords. Our prices reflect market conditions and transport risks," the Kalari replied. "If you do not like them, find another supplier." "Perhaps we will take what we need by force," Vexthul suggested. The chamber erupted in accusations and counter-threats. Ancient grudges carefully managed for decades burst into the open. Species that had been allies for generations remembered old betrayals. Former enemies saw opportunities for revenge. Council leader Thalmoran's energy field pulsed frantically as he tried to restore order. But without the subtle human guidance that had smoothed council operations for months, he found himself powerless to control the chaos. "We need emergency protocols," he announced. "All members will restrict their statements to essential business only." "Who decides what is essential?" demanded the Draconis representative. "You, the Zenthari? The species that have been secretly collaborating with humans?" "We have not been collaborating," Vexthul protested. "We have been gathering intelligence on human activities." "By using their services," the Kalari delegate observed. "Half the council has consulted human mediators for private disputes." The admission hung in the air like poisonous gas. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared accusingly at their neighbors. Into this chaos walked human. Ambassador Minho Kang. He had requested permission to address the council under ancient, diplomatic protocols that predated humanity's arrival. Technically, he still had the right to speak until his diplomatic immunity was formally revoked. "Honorable delegates," Minho began, his voice calm in the storm of accusations. "I bring a message from the Human Diplomatic Corps." The chamber fell silent. Every eye focused on the man who represented the species they were trying to contain. "We never forced anyone to accept our help," Minho continued. "We simply offered solutions when others could not find them. If you no longer want our assistance, that is your right. But understand what you are choosing." He gestured toward the displays showing galactic news feeds, conflicts erupting across dozens of systems, trade routes collapsing, civilian populations fleeing from renewed violence. "This is your galaxy without human mediation," Minho said quietly. "The same galaxy that existed before we arrived. The same conflicts that have raged for centuries. The same problems that killed millions while you debated instead of acting. Bexthal's crystal body flared with anger. You are threatening us. No, Minho replied. I am simply stating facts. When we help, conflicts end and trade flourishes. When we do not help, conflicts return and cooperation dies. This is not our choice. It is yours. The chamber remained quiet for several long moments. Finally, Thalmorin spoke. What are your terms for ending this crisis? Minho smiled sadly. We have no terms. We never did. We will continue helping anyone who asks for help. We will continue working for peace and cooperation. We will continue believing that problems can be solved through talking instead of fighting. He paused at the chamber's exit. The question is not what humanity wants from you. The question is what you want from yourselves. Do you want to live in a galaxy where conflicts can be resolved, or one where they can only be won? After he left, the council sat in uncomfortable silence. Outside, reports continued to arrive of spreading chaos and renewed conflicts. The sanctions designed to contain humanity were working perfectly. The problem was that containing humanity meant containing the peace they had helped create. And as the galaxy burned around them, the council began to understand the trap they had walked into. They had become dependent not on human strength but on human wisdom, and wisdom, unlike strength, could not be taken by force. The human vessel Harmony's Edge drifted in neutral space, far from any inhabited system. Chief Human Diplomat Jae Sung O stood in the ship's central conference room reviewing the invitations his staff had sent across the galaxy. The message was simple. Come talk. No preconditions. No cameras. No records. Just conversation. Most species had ignored the invitation. After 3 weeks of escalating conflicts and economic collapse, few governments wanted to be seen negotiating with the humans they had tried to contain, but some came anyway. The first to arrive was Captain Kevtar of the Zenthari. His crystal body reflected the soft lights of the conference room as he took his seat across from Jae Sung. My government will deny I am here, he said. That is fine, Jae Sung replied. What matters is that you are here. My homeworld is running out of power. The Kalari refuse our payment terms. My people are talking about taking energy sources by force. Kevtar's body dimmed with shame. We were a civilized species before this crisis began. You still are, Jae Sung said gently. Desperation makes people consider desperate options. That does not change who they are inside. The next arrival surprised everyone. Morveth of the Kalari materialized in the conference room like mist becoming solid. The energy being had not been in the same room as a Zenthari in 2 centuries. We know you are here, she said to Kevtar, her voice carrying across dimensional frequencies. Our sensors detected your ship's crystal emissions. Kevtar's body flared with defensive energy. Have you come to mock our desperation? I have come because my people are suffering too, Morveth replied. Without Zenthari rare metals, we cannot maintain our dimensional generators. Our worlds are becoming unstable. Jae Sung watched the 2 beings face each other across the table. Centuries of mistrust hung between them like a wall. What do you both actually want? He asked quietly. Energy, Kevtar said immediately. Stability, Morveth replied at the same time. Are those things related? Jae Sung asked. The question hung in the air. Slowly, both delegates began to understand. The Zenthari needed energy to maintain their civilization. The Kalari needed stable matter to anchor their energy forms. They were 2 halves of a whole. Why did your people stop trusting each other? Jae Sung continued. Kevtar's body flickered with old memories. The Great Crystal War 8 centuries ago. They accused us of stealing their energy signatures. We did not accuse, Morveth corrected. We proved it. Your scientists copied our dimensional frequencies without permission. Because our homeworld was dying, Kevtar protested. Your people refused to share the technology that could save us. Because you tried to steal it first. Because you would not even talk to us about buying it. Jae Sung let them argue for several minutes. Old hurts needed to be voiced before they could be healed. Finally, he raised a hand for silence. So the Zenthari needed energy technology to save their world, he summarized. The Kalari had that technology but would not share it. The Zenthari tried to steal it. The Kalari felt betrayed and cut off all contact. Is that correct? Both beings nodded reluctantly. What would have happened if the Kalari had agreed to share the technology for fair payment? Jae Sung asked. We would have paid anything, Kevtar admitted. Our people were facing extinction. And what would have happened if the Zenthari had explained their situation before trying to steal the technology? Morveth was quiet for a long moment. We might have helped. Our people value life, even non-energy life, but the theft felt like an attack. So a misunderstanding became a theft, which became a war, which became 8 centuries of hatred, Jae-sung observed. And now you are both suffering because you cannot trust each other enough to solve problems that affect you both. More delegates arrived over the following days. Commander Rex Moley came from Omega-7, desperate to prevent his station from becoming a battlefield. General Thakmori arrived from the Morgani Empire, officially on a scouting mission but privately worried about the spreading chaos. Each new arrival brought the same story. Old conflicts flaring back to life, trade agreements collapsing, civilian populations caught between governments too proud to back down. Human facilitator Hyejin Lim worked with smaller groups, helping species remember why they had wanted peace in the first place. The techniques were simple but effective. Ask what people really want, not what they say they want. Find common ground. Build solutions that help everyone. The hardest part is getting them in the same room, she told her colleague Taeho Shin. Once they start talking, they usually realize their problems are not as different as they thought. Taeho nodded. He had been working with the Morgani and Draconis delegates, helping them understand how their border conflict was hurting both species. They remember the fighting, but they forget why it started. Most conflicts begin over real problems, but they continue because of pride. The breakthrough came when Kalari Captain Morveth asked a simple question during a group session. What if we were all wrong about each other? The room fell silent. Representatives from 6 species stared at each other across the conference table. Wrong how? Asked Captain Kevtar. Wrong about motivations? Wrong about intentions? Wrong about what other species actually want? Morveth's energy form shifted colors as she thought. We have been fighting over assumptions that might not be true. Commander Rex Moley, his insectoid features clicking with nervous energy, spoke up. On my station, I see the same pattern every day. Species arrive expecting conflict. They prepare for betrayal, so they act defensive, which looks like aggression to the other side. Creating the very conflicts they were trying to avoid, observed General Thakmori, his bark-like skin rustling with understanding. Human analyst Boram Kim had been listening from the corner of the room. Now she stood and activated a holographic display. I have been studying galactic conflict patterns, she announced. Most of your ancient hatreds are not actually ancient. The display showed a timeline of galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. Red spikes marked major wars and trade disputes. But the pattern was revealing. The Great Crystal War between the Zenthari and Kalari, Boram pointed to one spike, started over a resource shortage on the Zenthari homeworld. The Morgani Draconis border conflict, she indicated another spike, began when refugee ships from a plague needed somewhere to land. She highlighted conflict after conflict, refugee crisis, resource shortage, trade route disruption, natural disaster, economic collapse. Almost every major conflict started because someone needed help and could not get it through normal channels. The delegates studied the data with growing amazement. Wars they had thought were about territory or pride had actually begun as humanitarian crises. The hatred came later, Boram continued. First there was a problem. Then there was a desperate action to solve the problem. Then there was retaliation for the desperate action. Then there was counter-retaliation. By the time the fighting stopped, everyone had forgotten what they were originally fighting about. But they remembered who had hurt them, Morveth said quietly. Creating enemies out of people who should have been allies, Kefter added. The summit produced the Harmony Protocols, a framework for preventing conflicts before they started. The principles were simple. Early communication about developing problems, neutral mediation for disputes, and shared resources for humanitarian crises. More importantly, it created ongoing relationships between species that had been enemies for generations. Regular communication channels, joint training exercises for disaster response, and cultural exchange programs to help young beings from different worlds understand each other. This is not a treaty, Jae-sung explained, as the delegates prepared to return to their homeworlds. Treaties can be broken when governments change or conditions shift. This is a network of relationships. It grows stronger when people use it. Captain Kevtar looked around the room at delegates who had been enemies when the summit began. What do we tell our governments? They sent us here to gather intelligence on human weaknesses. Tell them you found humanity's greatest strength, suggested Commander Rex Moley. We help people remember that they are all trying to live in the same galaxy. And that galaxy works better when people cooperate instead of compete. As the delegates departed, Jae-sung stood alone in the conference room. Through the viewport, he could see the stars that connected all their worlds. The network of relationships was already spreading. Species that had participated in the summit were reaching out to old enemies, offering to restart conversations that had been frozen for decades. The Galaxy Council's attempt to contain humanity had failed, but it had also revealed something important. The galaxy did not need human control. It needed human perspective, the idea that every problem had a solution that could help everyone involved. And that perspective was now spreading far beyond humanity's reach, carried by beings who had remembered what it felt like to hope for peace instead of preparing for war. 2 years after the crisis that nearly tore the galaxy apart, Ambassador Hyun-woo Kim stood in the renovated Galaxy Council chamber. The circular table remained, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once there had been rigid hierarchy and suspicious silence, now there was the comfortable buzz of species working together. The Kepler Mining Cooperative reports record profits for the 6th straight quarter, announced the quarterly economic review. The joint Xanthari-Kalari deep space exploration mission has discovered 3 new habitable worlds. The Morgani Draconis Environmental Restoration Project has successfully cleaned up the pollution from their old border wars. Hyun-woo smiled as he listened to the reports. These were the same species that had been ready to fight wars over territory and resources just 2 years earlier. Now they were collaborating on projects that benefited everyone. The change had not happened overnight. It had taken months of careful relationship building, cultural exchange programs, and patient mediation of minor disputes before trust could grow. But once it started, the transformation spread faster than anyone had expected. Human mediator Seung-min Park called the council session to order with a question that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. What does success look like for everyone in this room today? The question itself represented the revolution in galactic politics. Instead of each species fighting for their own advantage, the council now began each session by identifying shared goals. The Xanthari homeworld energy crisis has been resolved, reported Vexithul. His crystal body glowed with health and satisfaction. Kalari energy technology, combined with Morgani power distribution systems and human efficiency protocols, has given us more reliable power than we have had in centuries. The Kalari delegate Morveth materialized beside him. The trade relationship has been profitable for both our peoples. More importantly, it has opened communication channels that are helping us resolve other old disputes. At the far end of the table, General Takmori of the Morgani Empire rustled his leaf-like appendages with pleasure. The border restoration project with the Draconis Federation is ahead of schedule. Our former battlefields are becoming nature preserves that both species can enjoy. These success stories were being repeated across the galaxy. The Sol Standard had become the foundation of interstellar economics, ensuring that trade agreements benefited all participants rather than exploiting the weak. The win-win protocol had been adopted by hundreds of trading stations, creating a network of fair commerce that stretched across known space. But the most significant change was not in politics or economics. It was in culture. On the colony world of New Jeju, Dean Yoonji Choi stood before the first graduating class of the Galactic Harmony Institute. The students before her represented 12 different species, young beings who had grown up learning alongside each other instead of fearing each other. You are the first generation to be truly galactic citizens, she told them. You speak each other's languages. You understand each other's cultures. You have formed friendships that cross species lines. In the front row, a young Xanthari crystal form sat next to a Kalari energy being, their different forms of existence creating a beautiful light display as they interacted. Behind them, Morgani saplings shared notes with Draconis hatchlings, their natural enemies turned study partners. These young beings would go on to become diplomats, traders, scientists, and artists. But more importantly, they would carry with them the assumption that cooperation was normal and conflict was something to be prevented rather than won. The transformation was not limited to the major powers. Throughout the galaxy, Smaller species that had been ignored or exploited by the traditional power structure found themselves with new opportunities. The Thakari, previously dismissed as primitive by the crystal-based Xanthari, had become essential partners in environmental restoration projects. Their understanding of biological systems was proving invaluable as the galaxy worked to repair damage from centuries of destructive conflicts. The insectoid Vixari, once feared as raiders and pirates, had transformed into the galaxy's most effective disaster response coordinators. Their hive-mind communication abilities made them perfect for organizing complex relief operations across multiple star systems. Species that had never been allowed to join the Galaxy Council found themselves welcomed as full partners in the new collaborative system. The old hierarchy based on military strength and ancient prestige had been replaced by a network based on contribution and cooperation. In the council chamber, the business of the day continued with an efficiency that would have amazed the old assembly. Disputes were resolved through mediation instead of military posturing. Trade agreements were negotiated based on mutual benefit rather than economic warfare. Long-term planning replaced short-term advantage-seeking. The Draconis Federation requests assistance with the Vega Sector refugee crisis, announced the session moderator. 40,000 beings are displaced by the collapse of the old Xerion government. Instead of the blame-passing and responsibility-dodging that would have characterized the old council, the response was immediate and practical. Xanthari crystal ships can provide temporary housing, offered Vexthul. Our emergency shelters can be constructed quickly and modified for different atmospheric requirements. Kalari energy systems can power the refugee camps, added Morveth. We have mobile generators designed for exactly this type of crisis. Morgany agricultural ships can provide food production, said General Thakmori. Our biopods can grow crops suitable for most species within days. The human coordinator, now officially recognized as the Galactic Harmony Facilitator, took notes and began organizing the response. Transportation will be handled by the joint fleet established under the Incheon Disaster Relief Treaty. Medical support can be provided by the Multi-Species Health Cooperative. What about long-term resettlement? The discussion that followed would have been impossible under the old system. Species offered to accept refugees permanently, sharing the burden instead of forcing it onto the closest neighbors. Worlds that had resources but low population offered land for new settlements. Species with advanced technology offered to help terraform marginal worlds into habitable colonies. Within 6 hours, a comprehensive relief plan was in place. Within days, refugee ships were moving toward temporary camps where they would be safe, fed, and cared for while permanent solutions were developed. The crisis that might have destabilized entire sectors under the old system was resolved efficiently and humanely. As the council session ended, Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had never sought to rule the galaxy. They had simply wanted to live in a universe where problems could be solved through cooperation instead of conflict. The hardest part was convincing people it was possible, he told his aide, Youngmin Park, as they walked through the station corridors. Most species had been fighting for so long they forgot they had choices. What changed their minds? Youngmin asked. Hyunwoo paused at a viewport showing the busy docking bays. Ships from dozens of species were arriving and departing, their crews working together with the casual efficiency of people who trusted each other. Success, he said simply. Once they saw that cooperation actually worked better than competition, the change became inevitable. People prefer prosperity to poverty, peace to war, friendship to fear. They just needed to see that those things were possible. The transformation continued to spread. New trade routes opened between species that had never communicated before. Joint scientific projects produced discoveries that no single species could have made alone. Cultural exchange programs created art and music and literature that blended traditions from across the galaxy. The old Galaxy Council still existed, but its role had fundamentally changed. Instead of ruling through authority and fear, it facilitated through service and coordination. Instead of maintaining order through separation and hierarchy, it promoted harmony through integration and cooperation. Most importantly, the changes were becoming permanent. Young beings growing up in the new system could not imagine returning to the old ways of constant conflict and mistrust. They spoke multiple languages, had friends from different species, and expected cooperation to be normal. The network that had begun with human diplomats mediating local disputes had evolved into a galaxy-wide culture of collaboration. Problems were still solved through discussion and compromise rather than force and intimidation. But now the solutions came from beings who had learned human methods and made them their own. As Hyunwoo reached his office, he found a message waiting from the Galactic Harmony Institute. Director Yoonji Choi wanted to discuss the latest enrollment numbers. Applications were pouring in from across known space as parents realized that their children needed to learn cooperation skills to thrive in the new galaxy. 10,000 new students this term, the message read. We are going to need more campuses, more teachers, and more dormitories designed for multi-species living. The demand is incredible. Hyunwoo smiled as he drafted his reply. The greatest victory was not that humanity had changed the galaxy, but that the galaxy had chosen to change itself. The seeds of cooperation had taken root in soil prepared.